Welcome to Veronica Live, and we've got a big guest today, and his name is Jaime Miller, and he writes and has his own kind of blog called Reasonable Arguments, and we just got connected. We've got a mutual connection. Our Republican chairman, Evan Power, I know you reached out to me to come on, and I've been so excited to have you on, Jaime, because everything you write is just wonderful, and we've got to talk about all of those things that have been happening. So first, welcome to Veronica Live.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And last time you and I met, the debate had not happened. So I wanted to start and see what you thought about the debate. I mean, the blowback, the world is crumbling as we speak still from this debate a few days ago. So how did you see the debate, Jaime?
I think I saw it like every other American saw it, and it's unfortunate for the country that the Democrats have not picked anyone who is coherent enough to run the country to actually be their nominee. I think there's a lot of us who speculated this, but certainly last Thursday night was something that we all collectively watched almost in aghast. Like my wife's not political at all, but she watches with me, and I like to get her feedback because she doesn't. She's not hyper partisan one way or the other. And after 20 minutes, she got up to do the dishes. She goes, I just can't. This is elder abuse. I cannot. And she was being serious. She was just like, this is not right that they are doing this to him. And she wasn't talking about Donald Trump. She was talking about his own family, his own party. And, now, the question is, can he pull it back together and be competitive against Donald Trump? Are Democrats going to replace him on the ballot? Who do they replace him with? And then should that be Kamala Harris, who then becomes their vice presidential nominee? And so there's a lot of moving parts over there. So, I don't want to spill the beans and just, I'm happy to talk about however much you want, but, we
have to talk
blog
about it. And then you wrote a column about it too. But I wanted to say, of course, I thought it was atrocious. I mean, I still feel horrible for the man. It was literally horrific. And then the camera angles were awful. And then, of course, on X yesterday, they were showing Dana, that was one of the moderators from CNN, like pointing, like, look at Jake. And the poor man, it was so pathetic. And then yesterday, the Dems sent out their little yapping pit bull dog, Nancy Pelosi, to go, I'm old, but that's okay. Biden can still be our president, and was defending it. And at one point she said that Trump was, he was having the cognitive issues. I mean, oh dear God. And then my favorite is, and I'm sure you saw it on X, darling Barack Obama posted, bad debate nights happen, trust me, I know, but this election is still a choice between someone who has fought for ordinary folks his entire life and someone who only cares about himself. And so, and he finalizes his little tweet here saying that we still have to support Joe Biden. So we're supporting a corpse at this point, is how I see it.
Wait a minute. He said that we should support the guy that supports the little guy and not the guy that's just interested in something. I think he's got it backwards, right? I mean, Trump's for us, and Biden is for Biden.
Well, Democrats are expert at waking up, looking at the mirror, seeing their flaws, and going out in front of TV cameras and saying that Republicans caused them, right? And so they're expert at anything that they are doing, they are going to accuse us of. So the second, this has been going on for a couple months with Donald Trump being accused of cognitive decline.
Right.
And that's when I thought that Joe Biden must be much worse than we expected. We already knew he was flying back to Delaware every weekend. I speculate to get medical treatments. I think I wrote that in a blog about 6 months ago, and people thought I was crazy. And I was just like, well, why is he going home every single weekend and he has no public events? He already won an election in 2020 campaigning less than James Garfield did in 1880 in his front porch campaign. So every presidential candidate between 2020 and 1880 campaign more than Joe Biden did in 2020. and so he campaigned from the basement. They claimed it was from COVID, all these other things. And now I speculate that everybody knew he had problems doing anything but reading off a teleprompter then. He clearly was attacked by Donald Trump. He had no pivot. He had no, it was kind of funny because the State of the Union address, which he did very well with, and, read off a teleprompter, and he laid the traps for Republicans to boo him, and then he would come in with his preset line, and he didn't have that opportunity during the debate. And Trump probably gave him several opportunities to at least defend himself. If this was an MMA fight, Joe Rogan would have jumped in and called it off for, just hitting somebody without protection, right? And but it was a sad. I after watching the whole thing, the word that comes to mind is sad. Like I
felt that way too. I felt that way.
So do you think it was I've heard a lot of people attacking Trump, not necessarily maybe too strong a word, but criticizing Trump for not attacking Biden at those opportunities, as opposed to just letting people see what was really going on. I thought it was, he was kind of a sly fox there.
I thought Trump showed great discipline, and I think if he had not shown that discipline, that would have been the story. And so I thought Trump handled it very well. Well, he got his one dig in where he's like, "Hey, I don't even understand what he said. I don't think he knows what he said." And
that was so painful.
I don't know that anybody in America, I don't know that anybody reading the closed captioning. The closed captioning said mumble, right? That's what the closed. If you go watch that under closed captioning, it says something like mumble, and it's like, well, I don't know what he said. But if Trump had done that for 90 minutes and just punched the guy while he was on the canvas, if that would have been the story, and we would be having a different conversation today. So, a criticism of Trump going into the debate is that he lacked discipline, and I thought he showed incredible discipline.
Yeah, I do too. I didn't know how he was going to be, and he came off very presidential to me, so I was pleased at that. Well, I'm an ex-addict, Jamie. John knows this now because I bought that damn check mark a couple months ago, and I'm reaching. I'm almost on 3 million feeds, so I'm trying hard. But yesterday, Bill O'Reilly came out and he wrote, "Looks like President Biden will give up his re-election campaign." BillO'Reilly.com is way ahead of this story. Best analysis out there. Please check it out. And so I was like, excuse me? So I posted on Bill O'Reilly's X yesterday twice, and this one went crazy. So I've had like 34,000 views, and I wrote, where are we hearing this, Bill? Dr. Jill won't give back the mic with her fame addiction, and Obama's on X protecting Biden. Plus, I don't think Obama wants to give up his fourth term. So I really feel that way. And then today we see the launch of the Vogue cover with Jill, and everybody's commenting the family gathered this weekend and they're behind Biden, that they don't want to give it up. I mean, are you feeling that way too? This family doesn't want to give this up.
And the Democrats are also facing the karma of their DEI, right?
Yeah.
They
in a big way.
They picked a vice presidential candidate. They picked a vice presidential candidate who was not qualified, who was not ready to take the helm if it's needed, and because of her gender and her race. And now they're in a position where she can't win the presidency. And they have major political ramifications should they hopscotch her with anyone. Forget about Gavin Newsom, a white man. I mean, if she's not the nominee, if Joe Biden backs out and Kamala Harris is not the nominee, they fracture their party for probably a decade. And so if you're a long-term thinker within the Democratic Party, number one, you want to think that, hey, Joe Biden might be able to get back in the game and make this a coin flip election, which it was going into the debate. And I think that's what will end up happening, because we'll see. I don't think we'll see good polling until mid-July because polling historically is bad the week of July 4th. Everybody is in Europe, national parks or beaches, right? And so you don't get a really good sample of polling the week of July 4th.
So Jaime, tell, because I'm so excited to talk to you. I forgot to tell us your background so people know what you've been up to all of this time, besides talking to Veronica on Veronica Live, which I was so excited about.
Now I have a new highlight to my career, and I mean that because this is truly, I think, probably just the second broadcast, and you're probably the most famous podcaster I've been on. So thank you for having me.
Hey, I had General Petraeus. I've had some big names, so you're up there.
Yeah, you have. So I'm proud to be among them. I have about a 30-year career in political campaigns. I'm a former executive director of the Republican Party of Florida. I've run 4 or 5 statewide campaigns. I've run about 4 leadership races for state party chairman or other kind of party offices, at both the Republican Party of Florida and the Republican National Committee. And I've worked with people like Ed Rollins, who was Ronald Reagan's campaign manager in 1984. And if he were on this blog, he'd say he won all 50 states if it wasn't for, northern Minnesota stealing the election from him in that one state. But he's the campaign manager who won 49 states for Ronald Reagan in 1984. And so I've been, and I'm not a historic. I don't come from a historic political family. My dad was a minister. My mom was a social worker, and so I've just been fortunate in my career that I've been around a lot of good people. And I've learned a lot, and some of those experiences are from the school of hard knocks, and some of it's from being very close to people who have been willing to mentor me along the way.
So why do you love politics so much? Because like you said, you didn't come from it. I was in the military 20 years, and I've been dying to talk politics, and so I have now the last 4, and in the last 10, I've been involved in multiple campaigns myself because I feel like it's a calling to make every seat red, and just by starting with one of my big I fight, pro-life all the time. That's one of my big platforms, but I love the military. I love our country. I want to make every seat red. And then I'm finding, John and I, we had an author on the other day, and he called Democrats pagans. And so that's my new word. I really feel like they're demonic / pagans, because how do you get there? So what stirred your heart to fight for everything red?
I'm not sure what put the passion there, let's say, but I was always concerned for the country's future, going back to my middle school age, middle school days or whatever, and I just read a lot and felt like there needed to be a different voice in politics. I was a student of Ronald Reagan and his presidency, although I was never old enough to vote for him. And then, it just became a passion, and that at some point I volunteered. Like I'm sure many of your listeners are, hey, how can I get involved? How can I make a difference? Go call a candidate you like and say, who's running for county commission or school board or something that's in your community that matters, and volunteer for them. And volunteering may be, hey, I'm going to go knock on 100 doors. Volunteering may be, hey, I'm going to invite 10 of my friends over to my house, and we're going to have coffee, and you're going to meet this candidate I like. So you can make the volunteerism what your comfort level is. For me, back when I started and volunteered, I went door to door in my own neighborhood that I'd lived in for most of my life and introduced people who were almost all Democrats, Southern Democrats, to a Republican, and said, I believe in this person. I hope you'll vote for her. And she ended up winning. And it was funny because there was a Republican running in a different race who would not go door to door with me, and he ended up losing by about 100 votes. She ended up winning by about 500 votes. And so just that little bit of, and literally 300 of those votes, and we knocked on maybe 100 doors, right? And on a Saturday afternoon, and that entire neighborhood was that 600 vote swing between those two candidates. And Clay came up to me afterwards, the losing candidate, and just said, Jaime, I guess I made a mistake by not going door to door with you. And I'm like, I'm not going to call it a mistake. You made your decision, right? And so it showed me the power of one person, one vote. And then, what I didn't say earlier, I went on to become the director of grassroots for the Republican Party of Florida in 1998. And then I was a field director in 98, became director of grassroots for the state party in 2000. And I just carried that little bit to make a difference. And, in one thing that we did with our grassroots, which we never, ballot harvesting back then was legal, and the state party never did it in general elections. And so I put together a little ballot harvesting program, and we went around to about 10,000 people in 2000 and collected their ballots. Back then you had to mail them. You couldn't just take them into the office, but if you picked them up, you could mail them back to the office. And so I figured out how we could go directly to the post office where the supervisor received their ballots on the Monday right before the election, and mail the ballots so they would get there in time to be counted. And of course, those 10,000 ballots were certainly part of the 537 vote difference with George W. Bush beating Al Gore. So, so every people who think you can't make a difference, you can. Local races, you certainly can. Even statewide races that are close. If you have friends who are in those Rust Belt states of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, or even in kind of what I hope will become swing states of Virginia, New Hampshire, and Minnesota, if you have friends, talk to them. Make sure they go out and vote the right way, and those votes can make a difference.
Well, that's great, and then I know you're friends with. You've worked hard for Joe Gruters, who is one of our Florida state senators, and he was previously to our Florida chairman, and now our national committee man elect. And then you're friendly too with chairman of RPF now, Evan Power, and they've both been on my show. So you're very well connected with these gentlemen. So what do you want us to know about Joe Gruder and then Evan Power that we don't know? Because they're huge Republican leaders here in the state of Florida.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because the people I try to have long-term professional relationships with are, first and foremost, I want them to be good people, right? And both of those men are good people. And we need good people in office. And so I'm proud that they're both serving in the roles that they're in. I don't know that I have any secret stories to tell you. If you had Joe on your on your podcast, he's pretty much an open book. What you see is what you get. And, as much as over the years, he's a client of mine, he's a friend of mine, his wife and family. I've gone golfing with Joe and his children, and, they've been good friends for over 20 years. And as much as I try to be like, hey, Joe, you should be a little bit more strategic about it, he's like, this is just who I am. I'm not. That's just, I am, if you ask me a question, I'm going to give you an answer, and I'm sure that's the experience you had with him on your show. And Evan is kind of the exact same way where, yeah, Evan's a little bit more strategic because he's state party chairman and, needs to guard those words because one slip could be, national news when you're the state party chairman for Florida.
We know that, or global news. But we won't comment on that.
Yeah, or the previous state party chairman, right? National, it's just So we have, but Evan, I feel like is done a really good job of trying to be his own person as state party chairman, which is not easy to do. And you have a Republican governor and cabinet, you have supermajorities in the House and Senate. And so you have a lot of masters when you're state party chairman. And Evan has said, listen, I am going to be your leader, but I'm also going to do the right thing over here. And so I've really been appreciative of Evan's leadership, since he's taken the helm at the state party. And I think people can feel confident that their support of the state party is going to someone with honor and someone with a plan and somebody who knows how to implement that plan.
Well, he was just on a few weeks ago, and it was so exciting because they've registered 1 million Republican voters, and that's just huge. Because when DeSantis was running against who's the mayor that I'd never heard of till the next morning, I was like, who the hell is that? And then the vote was not, there wasn't as many. The gap wasn't as big as I would have wanted. And then, of course, Andrew Gillum ended up being such a freaking disaster. Elections matter. Voting matters, So
well,
I feel like we're strong now.
Yeah, if I can get strategic for a second, this might be a little bit too in the weeds, so feel free to edit me out if that's what you need to do. But, there's been a history in Florida, even where if one major political party candidate does not have a primary and their opponent does, that's the path to victory. And you can go all the way back to 1994 when Jim Smith won Secretary of State. He was one of the first Republican statewide office holders. He did not have a primary and the Democrats did, and he was able to leapfrog, right? And so, Andrew Gillum had a primary and Ron DeSantis had a primary. So it didn't surprise me that race was razor thin.
Okay, but I never even heard of Andrew Gillum before. And I woke up and literally my phone blew up because I thought it was going to be Gwen Graham, right? And my phone blew up and I was like, I don't know who the hell this is. And I Googled it and because I don't hang out in the halls of Tallahassee chasing people. So it was scary to me because he came out of the blue, Jamie.
Well, the part, he did and he didn't. He was the chair of the League of Cities, which gave him a power base to all the Democrat city commissioners throughout the state. So he had been working behind the scenes for some time to try to build a base of politicians who would help him behind the scenes. So it didn't surprise me that he beat Gwen Graham. It did a little bit, but it wasn't a huge surprise to me.
For us, Gwen Graham, she had taken out our Congressman Sutherland, and she was such a smooth operator. Even though she was a Dem, she was middle of the ground, So that's why
she had her daddy out there too.
Yeah, she had her.
It would have been a different general election campaign if it was Gwen Graham.
Well, so I honestly was worried she was going to win it. And then, like I said, she'd been very, in the middle, never ticked anyone off here in our county, so in our district. So it was shocking that it was Gillum, And were there back talk of his dabbling in drugs and running around with gay porn stars? Had you heard this before it happened in Miami?
I had not heard it before it happened. I did not hear it before it happened.
Because sometimes there's rumblings with politicians.
Sure.
That we knew this.
Now we knew he was a crooked mayor. We knew that he would employ any family member who needed to be employed, things like that, right? Okay. And so we knew that his running of Tallahassee was not above board, but I think most of us thought he would be a formidable candidate.
Well, and he was on CNN all the time, Jamie. He was on CNN
at that point,
talking.
Nobody had heard of. Yeah, well, at that point, nobody had heard of Ron DeSantis unless you read Donald Trump's tweets, right? Yeah. And so, so both parties were kind of going into this new ground with kind of untested candidates, right? And so when you think of untested statewide candidates and at that point in time, you just say, hey, listen, it's a close race. But I'd like to look forward a little bit past 24 and at 2026 because there's this theory that whoever wins the Republican primaries is going to win the general elections in 2026. And that could not be farther from the truth because number one, this is a little in the weeds, every 12 years, you have an election in Florida where you have no federal candidate at the top of the ticket, no president, no U.S. senator.
Oh, okay.
And
that
we
makes
know
it
that
tough.
those federal races, we know those federal races drive turnout. So 2026 is our year. That's our year where we're not going to have a statewide federal candidate at the top of the ticket. Number two, even though we have 1 million more registered voters, if it appears that we are going to have in each cabinet race some level of a primary. And I'm not convinced that Democrats don't know their formula to win is not to have a primary, because the only way they've won with a new candidate in the last 20 years is Nikki Fried, who did not have a Democratic primary. Republicans did. The Republican lost by 5,000 votes. And Alex Sink, who did not have a Republican primary for when she ran for CFO, and Republicans did, and she won. It was a close race then to. Don't hold me to the. I'm not going to try to remember the number, but it wasn't a blowout. But that's the Democrats' formula for winning. So if you take a John Morgan, who's a well-financed, independently wealthy billionaire, who is a household name in Florida because of his TV commercials, and he says, I'm running for governor, I'm going to put $100 million of my own money. But by the way, I'm going to put $10 million towards each cabinet spot as well, as long as we don't have a primary. We are going to have some tough races in November of 2026. Well, that's
scary because I just see from our local elections when there is, people are lazy and they barely show up when there's these primaries, literally. And I get so angry because I'm just worried at every moment. And then I'm sure in your world too, Jamie, and John's the same. Like, people constantly call us like, Veronica, who do we vote for? Give us your list, So we're the official vetters. But if you don't get your ass out to go vote, and only 20% are voting, it's just pathetic. I am so worried about November, Jamie. And I was
going to ask you, Jamie, just given your perspective, in history and having been around and observed the switch from the Democrats to Republican majorities in Tallahassee, is that pendulum swinging back the other way? I mean, I kind of look at it, from a way of corruption. I'm talking about this, as Alan Benz calls the soft corruption in Tallahassee, and where you have all these PACs and stuff, and it's almost like the parties are becoming irrelevant. The Democrat Party is absolutely irrelevant, but the Republican Party is not far behind. We don't recruit candidates anymore. There's no. I was a member of RPOF for 12 years as a chairman and a state committee man, and you couldn't get anybody to get off their dead ass and try to get into candidate recruitment. Nobody wants to do it.
Part of it is I believe. As much as Republicans, as a general rule, love the Citizens United U.S. Supreme Court case, I'm somebody who looks at that case and says, it's really not the best thing because it's led to the deterioration of the infrastructure of both political parties. And while I know that goes against conventional wisdom that we should have strong political parties, I think the Citizens United case, I think that's the point in the history where it's really started this extremism on both sides, is that every politician, as you described, Veronica, that every politician can become basically their own political party if they have somebody funding them. Yeah. And they can set up their own political committee, their own PAC, their own whatever, and they don't have to answer to anybody. And that used to be the parties. And so while we still had extremism in both parties, they weren't the voices of the party, because the people who had voices stayed within the guardrails, right? And and I'm not saying that those voices should be muted or anything else. I'm just saying that I think that's the pendulum that we're seeing, is that and it's not even corporate. It's when in 2016 and again in I want to say 2020 for Democrats, when there were multiple candidates on those primary debate stages, and especially in 2016, there is one billionaire who is fully financing 4 or 5 of those candidates. One person.
Yeah, Sheldon Adelson.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so he's gone now. He's deceased now. But the point is that we now have a system where one person there's 10 people on stage and one person's financing 5 of them. And so, or that one person's vastly the majority of donations to 5 of them. I'm not going to say they didn't have other donors, but you get my point. And
right.
And if that's the case, we have to kind of really say, okay, well, why does that one person have a larger voice within our Republican primary than our collective voices? And our collective voices are heard through the party. And and so I do think that pendulum may swing back. Now, I'm not familiar with Alan Bentz and how he describes what he calls soft corruption or soft whatever in Tallahassee. My guess is that's been going on long before Alan Bentz was elected there, and probably be there long after.
And he's been on the show, and I was just with him last week, so I've extended another invite.
It wasn't a surprising comment. It was just when he became Speaker of the House, you have to do deals, okay?
Yes.
And he always used to whip out that his 3x5 card with his 5 principles on it, and he said right up front, a lot of times I had to do deals that went against those principles because his job was to be Speaker and get stuff done. And
right.
You've obviously got the lobbyist crowd up there, pushing for stuff, and money talks, but it's almost like the PACs have become corrosive, and we've looked at a couple of candidates and talked to some of their opponents and stuff, and you look at them and it's like, their campaign account has, like for the Florida Senate, maybe $1.25 million in the campaign account, and then they've got a PAC that's friends of Senator whatever, and it's got $10 million in it, and it's like, and then you look at the list.
We had the one candidate, Jerry James, running for Senate, and the actual senator in like 2 years prior had $800,000 in his personal bank account, and it was up to $14 million. And how did that happen? And so this is my frustration: is that it's a money making. Everybody's helping each other. And then they forget about us when they get elected on what we need them fighting for.
Well, it's the one thing I keep saying is when are the grown-ups going to step in and fix something? You see that in the courts. All the stuff going on in New York. It's like with Trump. It's like when are the grown-ups going to step in and say this is it? This isn't the way we run our country. And have the grown-ups left? And all we're left with is this chaos.
Yeah, it's funny because one of the first letters to the editor I ever wrote and got published was about campaign finance reform in the little daily commercial in Leesburg, Florida. And, and then all my friends called me crazy because I advocated that politicians should be able to take as much money as they want from anyone who will give it to them as long as they report it quickly. If you want to take $1 million from U.S. Sugar, then we should allow politicians to take $1 million and put it directly into their campaign account and then defend that $1 million. Now, politicians are like, and I've run campaigns where, I'm working with a candidate and there's 3 times as much money spent on my candidate's behalf that I have nothing to do with. And I know a lot of people don't believe this, but I literally have nothing to do with it. Like I haven't contacted the political committee. I haven't coordinated with them. They just like, okay, we're going to go do this. And next thing I know, there's mail that's off message, off whatever. And people are calling me saying, hey, we saw your mail in the mailboxes. I'm like, no, that's not me. And, and certainly when a third party group does something negative, then, you get blamed for that too. And so, and by the way, I'm all for, I like to call it opponent clarification. I'm all for it. You have to, if somebody's anti-gun and they're telling the electorate they're pro-gun, I, as a campaign professional, have a responsibility to my client to make sure the public knows that they truly are anti-gun. That's not negative campaigning, but it is clarifying your opponent. And so we need to, but I think that in that regard, the pendulum has gone too far towards third-party groups being in control of the electorate, and candidates don't mind it because all the stuff that's negative comes out of a third-party group, and they shrug their shoulders and like, I didn't know it was coming. And sometimes they don't, sometimes they're coordinating it, or their campaign consultants coordinating it, but sometimes they literally don't know that it was coming, and they're like, now it's in the mailbox, and they're out there trying to defend this piece of mail from, as you know, Floridians who love sunshine or whatever they name it. And
so where do you come down on the federal elections? Candidates cannot coordinate with the PAC. Period. Against the law.
Yeah.
In Florida, the state, that's not the law. Candidates can have a PAC and they can run the PACs and they can put their families on the PACs. Do you think Florida should be looking to change to follow what the federal rules are?
This is one of those things I could argue both sides towards the middle, right? Because I think there's pros and cons to both. I think that having the federal saying that there's no coordination is, listen, we do this in our firm, where we'll have a political committee and a campaign, and we set up a firewall, and we set up teams.
Right.
And teams can't talk to each other about, and so there's not coordination, right? But there's
like-mindedness.
There like that's why you see, third-party groups put polling on Twitter, right? As long as it's publicly consumed, anybody can look at it. So to say that there's no coordination in an office without the public view, right?
But I'm looking at your ex. Well,
exactly. I'm going to look at your ex. Now, what they have said is illegal. What they have said that is illegal is if I set up a private ex and I only allow 3 members in it, and those 3 members just happen to be campaign professionals, and I'm running a PAC, right? What they said is if you have a public ex, and anybody can follow you, and you're putting out campaign information, so both you get it and your opponent can get it, then it's fair game. But is that not coordination? Yeah, it's a fine line, right? And so, like I said, I believe that candidates should be able to take unlimited money, put it directly into their campaign accounts, and then have to say why they took that money from those individuals or companies.
There you go. Well, I want to get back to you are a fantastic op-ed writer, and Reasonable Arguments is where we can find your stuff. You just wrote a column yesterday, I guess for my show, because it's so excellent. We've got to get into it here with you, Jaime. And you've entitled it, "Did Trump's VP strategy change after the debate?" And oh my god, I was reading this, and you kind of got my little Spanish side bullfighter came out because I kept reading Nikki Haley, and so I was like, oh, Jaime, we are going to talk, because I see Nikki Haley and I turn into a bull. It's like you pull out the red cape, and I can't stand her, and she just wouldn't get off the stage. She's sort of like Dr. Jill. We're fighting her for that damn microphone. But I wanted to get into your column because it's excellent. And you talk about Trump can go in 3 directions for his VP pick. So I wanted to go through the 3 categories with you. You talk about the safe pick, and which everybody keeps saying, North Dakota, Doug Burgum. And you've got Ben Carson, we love, and then you mentioned J.D. Vance, and that's the thing. That's the safe pick, right? For sure. And I don't know if people, and then I know if you pick a Doug Burgum, who's a billionaire, and he's actually very eloquent on all of his national hits he does, but I think the left will freak because it'll be like, oh my gosh, another white guy, So tell me about your safe pick. Who's your favorite out of those, I guess?
Here's the thing. I don't know that, Trump is this unique character in American politics, right? And so while I'm being very strategic in my column, and thank you for reading it and bringing it out and talking about it, but where I'm being very strategic, I don't know that Trump is. I think Trump does a lot of this from his gut and from his heart, and he's like, this is the person I want, this is the person I trust, this is the person who's best for America. Should I not be able to serve? That's who I'm going with, right? My column is very much more strategic than that, right? It's like, okay, if Biden doesn't run, and it's not Kamala or it is Kamala, it changes the dynamics of the race, And so out of the three safe picks, to answer your question, I like everybody on the list. I'm like you.
No, I like
think
them all.
Out of everybody I mentioned in that column, Nikki Haley's my least favorite. But
you kept mentioning her, Jaime.
Yes. So but I do believe from a strategic standpoint, if you are going to put states like, and if Trump is able to put Minnesota, New Hampshire, and Virginia in play, he wins the election hands down. And so who can he pick who increases his electorate, who not only that people will look at and be like, okay, this is something different and unexpected. And Nikki Haley is that pick. And so not that I like her or I'm pushing her or I'm suggesting that Nikki Haley should be the vice president. All I'm suggesting is from a strategic standpoint, if you are going to go after winning the election, which is what we must do, we must win this election. And one way to win that election is by putting the Rust Belt states of Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania in play. If you can put in these teetering swing states of New Hampshire, Minnesota, and Virginia in play, which I don't think they're in play yet, but they could after Biden's debate performance. And it looks like Trump is safe in, or going to be pretty safe in Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina, and the other swing states in the Sun Belt. And so, so going back to it, like it seems like Trump has connected to Doug Burgum, right? And so seems to be out of those three, probably the leading safe candidate. Okay. Now, I go on in that article to say that we need to, and what scares me about Doug, and I hear you that he's done well and he's gotten better, but he really didn't debate that well on those debate stages. You could argue that he didn't get enough time, couldn't get in his groove, a lot of things that are probably 100% accurate and fair. But he really didn't come across as Mr. Personality either. And if Biden is the person who is going to be the nominee, which I believe he will be, and Kamala Harris is the VP nominee, which I believe she will be, Kamala Harris is going to become the story of the last 60 days of this election. And we need to make sure that whoever Trump picks can go toe-to-toe with her and be seen as somebody who can serve as president should Trump not be able to serve.
Well, I don't think it's going to be hard to go toe-to-toe with her. I think a 5-year-old could go toe-to-toe with her. But
I couldn't disagree with you more.
Never, this is politics. Never underestimate people.
Okay, so number 2, you wrote Trump... Trump could choose someone who increases or solidifies a portion of the base. And for this, you put, again, Nikki Haley. You've got Tim Scott, and then you have Marco Rubio. And then you mentioned kind of Elise Stefanik, who I like, Byron Donalds, J.D. Vance again. So solidifies the base. Do you think we have to go with somebody that's not a white male and it has to be a woman? I mean, I love Marco Rubio because he understands world issues, and I was his campaign chair for 6 months when he ran for president, so I've always adored him. But who's your top pick for solidifying the base?
I do like Marco. I mean, I think Marco brings something to the ticket that. And I don't think anybody doubts that Trump has foreign policy experience, right?
Yeah.
But Marco Rubio has become a foreign policy expert, and I'm so proud of him for doing so. I knew him prior to him being Speaker of the House, in the state of Florida, and so to see him grow and become this foreign policy expert, and there's no question that Marco Rubio on a stage with Kamala Harris would do very well. J.D. Vance does very well, but the contrast, like you said, the contrast of a white man going against an African American woman, or like Kamala Harris, is going to be part of the story, and so and that's if the big if Biden's the nominee and Kamala's the VP nominee. So they all kind of bring something to the table, or they wouldn't be on the list, right?
Yeah. John, you had a question before
I
was running.
Did I lose you?
No. We're trying to divide and conquer here because there's so much, and we've got to wrap it up shortly.
But one of the things I wanted to point out, you didn't take into account that Trump is a transactional person. Okay, he is not. He's not looking at this strategically. He is looking at, number one, is the person I pick going to be loyal to me? That's why Nikki Haley is not on the list.
Yeah,
forget her.
That dagger still in his back from her.
And it doesn't mean, and I heard a good analysis, it doesn't mean policy loyalty. It means you're not going to screw me over if I make you vice president, because I'm the president and you're not. That's Trump. And if you understand
I 100% agree with you. Yes, I agree with that.
The second point is I can't recall any Republican vice presidential nominee other than Sarah Palin that generated any excitement or made any difference. I mean, Paul Ryan didn't make a bit of difference, who he was.
Kamala Harris did. Kamala Harris did create excitement in the Democratic base.
Right,
but
reflecting back on Kamala, she was the first one out when she ran.
They play race. They play race politics, and when Republicans try to play race politics, I think we're playing to a weakness. We're playing to Democrat strength, which means it's a weakness on our part. And I think it's a serious mistake for us to try to do that. Pick somebody that's going to be vice president that would be competent if they had to become president. That's the hit against Kamala Harris.
Tim Scott's too he's not a fighter enough. You didn't mention Vivek. And then the other person that's really kind of off the wall, but I've heard her speak last year, was Tulsi Gabbard, who is an independent, she says now, I guess.
They'll be cabinet people. They're not going to be vice presidential candidates.
Well, who's it going to be, Jamie? Who's the VP? If you had to pick one.
The title of the article is, Did the Debate Change Trump's Strategy? And okay. my question, I agree. I think we're kind of all in violent agreement here, where that we believe that Biden's dismal debate performance probably did not change Trump's, pick for VP.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, while I think it's a good article, I like to look at it strategically. Yep. I think the more important thing in my article that I bring out is that should Biden decide to leave the race, he's not going to do it before the end of the Republican National Convention, because he's not going to give Trump the ability to pivot to another candidate, because they're going to nominate the VP at the convention. He's going to be stuck with that person. And then if they pivot, then they then have the strategic advantage, right? If Biden then leaves. So,
I heard something.
Biden's out.
We only have a couple minutes, but I heard this yesterday, and I thought about it for a while, and I just don't think. And they're saying that potentially Michelle Obama. And when you think about the DNC convention, it's going to be in Chicago. That's their hometown. They roll out Michelle Obama with her crown. Oprah's there. Everybody loves them. Kumbaya. Because Kamala's a disaster, and Michelle Obama, I think, could be a force to reckon with. And, they'll put her back in her Jackie O clothes. But, I don't want her either. But, this is
number
one,
I don't think she wants it. Number two, she's not qualified, any more than Jill Biden's qualified or Laura Bush was qualified to be president. Yes, they've been around a president, they've seen presidential politics, but they're not qualified to be president. First and foremost, Michelle has no credentials to be president of the United States. At the end of the day, however, I think that you are correct that Michelle Obama is probably the only person in which the Democrats can choose and hopscotch Kamala Harris. She's probably the only one. And
Hillary
Clinton.
It's Hillary Clinton.
But I think you also have one other
Hillary
issue.
Clinton.
I tell you, it's Hillary.
The pantsuits.
But you also have to realize that they are not nominating their presidential nominee in Chicago. They have to nominate their presidential nominee on a Zoom call prior to that, so that person can meet the ballot qualifications for Ohio.
Okay.
So by the time they get to Chicago, they're already going to have their nominee.
Well, Jaime, we've got to have you back because 1 hour was not enough.
Well, I'd love to come back anytime you want me.
And I want to do an X with you. We've got to do an X in the evening because I know X, those blow up, and I'm dying to become like a force to be reckoned with on X. Even though Veronica Live, we're doing great. But it's been such a pleasure, and we will definitely have you back because, seriously, this hour flew by. And the column is brilliant, and we've been talking to Jaime Miller. You can find him on his X, and that is Rep Jam, so Republican Jam, and then your reasonable arguments for all of your stuff, and then you're on LinkedIn too, and that's where I read all of your awesome columns right there. Jaime, such a pleasure. I've got to have you back, and thanks for coming on Veronica Live.
It's my pleasure. I'm happy to join you anytime.